Cool. I think we're live. So, in the last two tutorials, we covered setting up a virtual environment, and we also covered writing to a SQL-like database. In this tutorial, we're going to work with an API client. So, what an API client is in this situation, API means a lot of things. It literally stands for let me go ahead and just start typing, and I'll put this here so that way you can see sort of the render version. So API stands for application. Does it stand for application programming interface? I think it's that application programming interface or something like that. It means a lot of different things. In the way I'm using it, I'm using a web API, and what this means is like, go ahead and just do this. It means that there exists a database with data that I cannot typically access with the SQL query. So there's like probably some SQL database that exists. Maybe it's NoSQL, but typically it's SQL. And I can't get to the data with just a SQL query. Instead, I have to, we have to send a request for data using a URL, maybe some authorization headers, and maybe some parameters, etc. There's a lot of things you can send in this request, but basically you're saying, hey, this data exists, and the only way I can access it, I can't go in their database and access it, but they've opened some of it up for people, and what they've opened up, you can hit using a URL with headers and other things like that. And so what we're going to be making is an API client in Python. So what this is in Python is typically a class. So an API client is a class object that allows us to make requests using sort of like Pythonic methods. So example, data equals client dot get data would be an example of that. So instead of like writing the actual URL request, we can just say like .get data, and that'll actually do all the, under the hood, it's doing all the requests for us. And we usually like to do this because we, if you have an API client, you might need to grab the data in a lot of different scripts. So having one area where that code lives is just easier to maintain. Like let's say the API changes, you don't want to change it in 5 different scripts, right? Where you've written that code, you want to change it in one script that you've imported in 5 different scripts. And so that is what we're going to be doing today. So steps. Whenever you work with an API client, I think there are 2 really important things. There's multiple. I don't know why I said 2. There's multiple. Let's just not even give it a number. Let's just go through this. Identify different endpoints. That's actually second. Identify the base URL. That's actually not even. Identify authorization type. This is the first one. Most APIs have an authorization. The one we're using today doesn't, so we'll just ignore this one. The next thing is you want to figure out what is the base URL. The next is what are the different endpoints. Identify endpoint parameters as well. So we don't just want to know the endpoints. We also want to know, hey, what parameters can I pass into my endpoints? And that's most of it. From there, it's really like read read docs for various API calls. And if we want to get more advanced, actually, like reading the docs and identify exception errors is also really important. In the API docs, most have like what kind of exceptions they'll throw at you. So it's just really good to know which errors you'll see, which ones you won't. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and just open up my API client. And I'm going to delete this ETL job. Let's just make an API client today. And then in the next video, we'll put it all together where we're taking our API client and actually like dumping that data into a database that we can then access later. So I'm going to go ahead and remove ELT job. CD2, remove ELT job. So in the business case, what we would typically use API clients for is API client.py use case. So typically what you use these for, like, let's say you work in an organization that wants to access Twitter data, you would use like, say you worked at a company that wanted Twitter data, you would use Twitter's API to get their data. You wouldn't scrape that data. It's just too much. Twitter has a great API. You would usually just use their API to get whatever you wanted. Similar, like, similarly, Amazon, Walmart, Spotify, name a thing, Instagram, Facebook, all have APIs. And you can use APIs not just to get data, but you usually want to get that data for a purpose. Either you're giving the data internally to different teams for reporting, or you're giving it to clients for reporting, you're building dashboards, you're storing it somewhere for analysis. Like, there's a lot of reasons you want to grab this data. It's not just simply to dump it, but we dump it for a reason. So learning API structure is really important. So let's go ahead and begin. Now, in today's example, I'm going to be using the Rick and Morty API, as you've probably seen some snippets of as I've been scrolling around my computer. This is a really clean API, believe it or not, even though it's Rick and Morty. It's like a great API. So whenever I go to an API, I go to the docs. It's the first thing. Don't worry about anything else. Go to the docs. I'll sometimes do the introduction. They have GraphQL. Like, if you want to use GraphQL to get it, you can pass a GraphQL query, which is pretty cool. We're not going to be doing GraphQL. We're going to be doing REST API. And in REST API, notice they give you the base URL. This is really common. So in our case, the base URL is, let me zoom in a little bit, rickandmorty.com/API. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to write base URL equals that. Just copy paste it. This contains information about all the resources. All the requests are GET requests. So this is really cool. We don't have to make posts or anything like that. It's just GET requests. And they go over HTTPS, which is also really cool. All responses will return data in JSON. So sometimes you have to say, hey, I want this response in JSON. I want it in CSV. I want it in XML. I want it in HTML. You have to tell like the website what you want. In this case, it's just always JSON, so that's good. Makes it simple. Most of them are JSON. And then they just said, like, here's an example. You can say get requests, and then they have the 3 base endpoints. So there's a character endpoint, location endpoint, and episode endpoint. So endpoint, let's just say, actually, let's not write that down yet. But there's character, location, and episode. And then it says the API will automatically paginate the responses. You'll receive up to 20 documents per page. Each resource contains an info object with information about the response. So this info object is going to have the length of the response that you get, the amount of pages that exist, the link to the next page, if it exists, and then the link to the previous page, if it exists, which is really nice. So this is sort of like, if you hit the character, there's going to be 826 characters across 42 pages, which makes sense because each page contains 20 characters. And then the next URL would be that same endpoint, right? API/character, but now we're specifying page equals 2. And they're giving that to us, which is really nice. And then they give the results here as a list. You can access different pages with the page parameter. If you don't specify any page, the first page will be shown. For example, in order to access page 2, add $page equals 2 to the end of the URL. And then we get this. So here's the result. The results come as a list. And then in this list are going to be dictionaries. So here's one dictionary. We have ID 361. This is Toxic Rick. He's dead. He's a humanoid. Rick's toxic side. He's male. His origin. We get the origin information, the location information, an image, which you can actually follow this link to an image right there. So we can use that to download an image if we wanted to. The episode. So this is a link to the episode information. So if we wanted to grab that, we would get episode information in JSON format. Same thing with location. We could put this in as well. All these are links to other endpoints. Because remember in this API, we have episode, character, and location. So when we hit character, we get location, we get episode as well. And then we get the URL for this character. So if we wanted just this character, we would get this, and we get when they were created. And that's one character. So this JSON is pretty big for just one character. There are larger, there are smaller, but in general, this is a pretty decent sized JSON for just one character. And there are 20 of these in this response. So let's get, let's just get all the characters. Excuse me. Let's get all the characters. And we do that just with this request right there. So what I'm going to do is make that request. So I'm going to say URL. Oh, I need to import some libraries. I need to import PostFixPath. I need to import requests. And I think it's just those two for now. And let's go ahead and bring in pandas. Just for the sake of it. So I'm going to say my URL equals PostFixPath dot join base URL, comma, character, just like that. And the reason I like to do it this way instead of just like coming in here and hard coding it is because I like PostFixPath to handle slashes for me. It'll format it nicely. I don't have to worry about anything. And let's just print our base URL and print our URL. We'll come here, and before I do anything, I need to activate my virtual environment. So that's been activated. Remember, we can see it right there. It's activated because of the VNV. And I'm just going to run it. Python. Python API client.py. No module name requests. Pip install requests. Gotta install that real quick. Now we'll run it. Cool. And so we printed our two endpoints right here. And we can see that one of them is, sorry, I wish I could put this. Yeah, that didn't work. Let me get rid of that. And so as you can see, it formatted this exactly how I wanted it, so I can actually use that to get a request. So let's just say response, that's what we call it, equals request.get. So this is making a get request, and I just pass in my URL. And I'm going to print my response right here. So I'm going to run that file. Actually, let's run this file in my terminal, just because this is a little bit bigger. So I'm going to do source whoops, activate. Sorry. Response 200, because it printed the response code, which we haven't talked about yet. So response.json, sorry. And what this does is it gets the response and it formats it as a Python dictionary. So you can tell it's a dictionary because it starts with one of these little curly braces, and we get all this nice stuff. This is really hard to read, so I'm going to bring in another library called prettyprint. And instead of printing it, I'm going to pretty print it, and maybe that'll make it a little bit nicer. Cool. Much easier to read. So if I come here, we have, that's an old one. We have our info, our count. We have the next API, the next URL for the API call if we want it, the number of pages, and then we have the results. And so the results is in order. So we have when this character was created, a list of episodes that they're in. So we have all these episodes for this character, the gender of the character, the ID. So this is the first character, the location, and this is Rick Sanchez. This is the main character. And he's alive, and then we just keep going, and we get it for everyone, basically, for the first 20. So let's come into this JSON, and let's just get info equals response.json info. So remember, this .json takes that response and it makes it a dictionary in Python. And then that dictionary, if we look, has, these keys. It has info and it has results as its keys. And then info has its value as a dictionary, and results has its value as a list of dictionaries. So I just want to go into info. Sorry, I did not mean to do that. I just want to go into info and get the number of pages, get the previous, get the next, get the count, etc. So let's do that. Let's do info. We're going to print info, and then we're just going to print a couple new lines and print info dot next, print info dot pages. Let's just do pages. So let's just get the pages here, and we're going to make that API call again. Cool. So here is the info dictionary, and this is the number of pages. So how do I get all of them? Okay, well, what I'm going to do is do page number equals 1. Actually, I'm going to make a loop. If you don't know what a loop is, go and learn it. This is kind of for, you should know what a loop is if you're watching these videos. But we're essentially going to loop. We're going to get this info. Page number equals info dot pages, just like that. And then we're going to say for page in page number 1 to page number +1. So what I'm doing is I'm going to go for page 1 to page number +1, and I'm going to say params equals. So whenever you're working with APIs, so let's go to pagination. It says, hey, if you want to paginate, put a question mark and page equals 2. This page equals 2 is like a dictionary. It's like a key and a value. And instead of putting it literally like this, you can do it literally. It's just a pain, and I definitely recommend you don't do it. What you can do is you can just say, I'm going to make a dictionary in Python and call this page. Call the key page. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to say my param is page, and its value is going to be the current page I'm on. So let's just print page. And let's see what we get here. So remember, this is going to iterate from 1 all the way up to the total number of pages plus 1, because of how Python indexing works. Int is not callable. What did I do? Whoops, in range. I don't know why I put page number there. Cool, so the first page number is 1. This is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, all the way to 42. Nice. So I can say for page number, I can make these params, and I can say response equals request.get URL equals URL. So it's the same URL here where I'm putting character together, and I'm putting my my base URL with it. And then in this time, I'm going to pass in params. So this request library can take in a params argument, and you pass in a dictionary of arguments that come after that. After this question mark. So in this case, our dictionary is page, and it's going to be 1, then 2, then 3, etc. And I'm just going to say responses is a list. Actually, I'm going to say results list. And here in my response, I'm going to get the response.json. And then in that response.json, I'm going to grab the results key, and that's going to give me a list right here. So I'm going to get a list, and then I'm going to take that list and extend my current list. Now, a lot of you are wondering, a lot of you might be wondering, I don't know if anyone's even watching this, but if you are watching this and you're wondering, hey, you already got the first page, why not start with the second page? You totally could. You could do that. I just want to start with 1 all over again and get all of them in this loop. It's a waste of an API call. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. So don't worry. And this should be good. So let's print length of our results list. And then let's just print the first 3 results. So this should work. Well, it's gone through all of them. Should have put a print statement in there, so it'll tell me which page it's on. Oh, cool. And we got all 826 of them. That's awesome. So the next thing I want to do is put this into a method. So let's go ahead and do that. So instead of kind of having it all run here, we're going to do this more professionally, more Pythonically, and we're going to make a method. So we're going to say get all characters. And in this method, we're going to have a base URL. We're gonna take this URL and put it in here. Let's get rid of that. Basically gonna do all of this. Except this time we're going to return results list. And now we're going to do something even more Pythonic. If name equals main. I'm going to say all characters equals get all characters, print all characters. A couple of things in this get all characters. I don't have any arguments here. That's fine. I am going to make an argument called verbose. I'm going to default it to true. I'm going to make it a Boolean. And this is going to return a list. Excuse me. It's going to return a list of dictionaries. So list of dictionaries. If you've never seen this in Python, if you've coded in Java, you have to tell Java like what your types are. This is a way of doing the same in Python. So verbose is going to be a Boolean. I'm going to default it to true. This method, get all characters, is going to return a list that is going to contain a bunch of dictionaries. And the way you get these is just there's a library in Python, a module called typing, and you just bring in list, dict. There's a couple of other things you can bring in. I don't know all of them. I mostly just use list and dictionary. And then it returns that list, which is the dictionary, which is good. Prints all the characters. And in here, the reason I did verbose is I'm going to say if verbose print params. Just like that. So verbose is going to run, and it's going to go ahead and just print the params. If it's on, it's defaulted to be on, so no worries there. I am running this method here, and we should be good to go. I can explain if name equals main later. For now, just type it. Basically, what that means is whenever I run this script here in my terminal, it's going to execute this code. So see, the verbose is on, so it's showing all the pages that we're hitting. And it printed out all the characters once it was done. Awesome. So let's go ahead and I think we are good here. Let's go ahead and take this and save it to a CSV in pandas. So to do that, we're going to do pd.json normalize. So what JSON normalize does is it's meant to take in a list of dictionaries like this, like it's showing right here, and it will actually flatten it into just like a regular CSV file. So we're going to see a CSV file, in our case with the characters, that has an ID column, a name column, a status column, a species column, a type column, a gender column, origin, location. Now this one's interesting because if you look at origin, it's the name and the link. So in the response, let's look at origin. Do you see how it's origin and then origin's got like two things in it? It's got a name and a URL. So you're actually going to see origin.name and origin.url as columns. Location.name, location.url, and then a big column of just episode lists, and that's it. So we're going to go ahead and pass in our all characters. And then we're going to save this to a folder that I'm going to just call data. make a folder called data right here. And I'm going to say df.toCSV. Right here, and data all characters .csv index equals false. That just means it's not going to write the row numbers, because pandas will have the row numbers here. And I'm just going to say print df.head print finished once it's done. So we'll go ahead and run that again. Cool. And then we are indeed finished. And we see the df.head right there. If I go to my data folder, I'll see this all characters CSV. And that's nice. Everyone likes a good CSV file. We can start doing stuff. This is wonderful. Awesome sauce. So let's say we now wanted to do this for episodes. I mean, it's like the same code. The only difference is now instead of character, we put episode. Give it that boolean. Isn't that crazy? So that's why you write nice code, because it's repeatable. It is repeatable though, which means we can actually like abstract it further out, so we don't have to just do this over and over again. But let's go ahead and do this for the episodes. And let's double check that. I put episode. Yeah, it is episode singular. Just wanted to double check that. Get all episodes. I mean, that's what's so nice about a nice API. They all provide this info. All the infos have the same pages value. And then we can just use that pages value and iterate every single time. It's repeatable. Good APIs, you can do this with. They're really nicely written. They're meant to, they want you to get data. Hey, please do stuff with our data. Make our data more valuable, right? All episodes equals get all episodes. All episodes equals, and then here we're going to put all episodes.csv. And that's it. I mean, there shouldn't be as many pages because there aren't. Yeah, there's 60 episodes or something. Here they are. We're done with that. And we come here and we have all episodes. There are 51 episodes. I haven't seen the new ones yet. This is awesome. So now the question is, okay, well, we can do this if we want to do that. How can we abstract this out so we don't have to just keep repeating the same code? And this is where we do object-oriented programming. So we're sort of doing like beginner level code right now, beginner to intermediate, I would say. Like this type hinting is definitely like not beginner stuff, but it's good to learn. Don't worry if you're not gonna, you don't have to do this stuff. I just like to do it because it looks nice. But we're gonna make 3 classes. Okay, so we're getting into object-oriented programming. Things are about to get pretty intense, but they are really, really good. I wish I could. Yeah, so now we're going to talk about object-oriented. So the 3 classes we're going to make is a base. We'll say Rick and Morty base client. The next class is Rick and Morty character client. The next class is going to be Rick and Morty episode client. And we could do the same for location. I'm just not going to do all of them right now. So each endpoint, you know, if a API isn't this isn't super complex, we might not need 3 classes to do this, right? We could maybe do this all in one. But if an API is fairly complex and has a lot of different endpoints, it's nice to wrap them each endpoint setup in its own client. And the base client is sort of what drives everything. So in the base client, we're going to say base URL equals, and we're going to give it this base URL. Right there. And I think that is really it. Yeah, I don't think there's like a whole lot to do here. The other thing we're going to do is just say define get all results. So we're going to have a method that just gets all the results, whether it's episodes or characters. It's going to do the same thing. And we're just going to put this method right there. Now, let's just go through this method and see, well, we don't need this anymore. And we're going to do self. So if you don't know what self is, self references the class. If you don't know a little bit of object-oriented programming, you need to go learn some. I'm kind of teaching you how to use it to build an API client. I may do a video on what object-oriented programming is, and I'll link to that video once I've built it. But I really just want to go over this right now, so apologies. So we're going to pass in self. And with self, I can get this base URL right here. So self.base URL. And now I have episode, but I don't want episode. I want it to be either episode or character or something like that. So what I'm going to do is put endpoint. And I'm going to have endpoint right here. And I'm going to pass in. Actually, let's just do this. Endpoint right here. And endpoint is going to be a string. And this is still going to return a list that is a dictionary. And I think, oh, and then verbose. Sorry. Just going to hit enter here for some readability. Yeah, so we have our endpoint, which gets used here. We have our verboseness. And I mean, that's really it. This method will work now for character client and episode client. So now the question is, how do we get it to work for character client? All right, what do we do? Well, there's a couple of things we can do. Man, there's so many options. Okay, I'll just show you sort of like maybe not the best option. So in this character client, we're going to say, hey, this character client is going to be a Rick and Morty base client object. What that means is whatever the Rick and Morty base client object has, this character client will also have. This has a base URL. It's going to have that. This has a method called get all results. It's going to have that. And we're just going to do def init self, and we're going to say super. Got to pass in args and keyword arguments. Super.init args and keyword arguments. Self.endpoint equals character. So let me just walk through. I just went ahead and typed all this. Um, let's walk through what's happening. I'm passing it. Basically, this is really common. You'll see this in Python a lot. If you put args and kwargs here, it just means you can pass in keyword arguments and arguments kind of arbitrarily into a method, and then you can just pass them into other methods using doing that. You can also pull them into your method and use them however you want. Um, the super means, hey, reference the base client and pass them into the base client. Now we don't need to do this because our base client actually doesn't have an init method. In fact, it may throw an error because it doesn't have an init method. In fact, I don't even think I need to do this because we're getting everything we want. Yeah, I don't even need to do that. Sorry, because it's got everything it needs here. Now what I'm going to do is say we're going to make a method called getAllCharacters. And in it, we're going to pass in self and nothing else. Actually, we could pass in verbose here. We'll default it to true again. But this time, the getAllCharacters is really just going to reference getAllResults. And the getAllResults method, we don't see it anywhere here because it's in the base client. So because our character client is a child of the base client, it gets this method. We can use it. And this method has a couple of arguments. It has verbose, it has endpoint. And this time our endpoint is going to be self.endpoint, right? And it has verbose. And we can say verbose. Now this is one way to do this right here. It's not the best way because we did have to make another method. Ideally, we could just use this method for everything, but making another method is not the worst thing. I'm just going to say return this. It's not the greatest. It's not the worst. There's another way to do it, which I might go over. And let's go ahead and use this client. So, yeah, I literally don't need any of this anymore. It's crazy how much code you get rid of whenever you abstract it out. I do want my name equals main. And let's just do client equals base client first. And we're going to say results equals client dot get all results. And we'll just do location. Print results. So let's check out location here. Yeah, it's singular. We got the same thing. I mean, we're all good right here. So let's print it. Nice. Boom. I mean, it's just super simple, y'all. It's great. I absolutely love this. And I mean, we could just pass any endpoint we want. The benefit of, you know, having it be like Rick and Morty character client is now I can say get all characters and get rid of this right there. Oh, I should have done episodes. This is just such a long one. Okay. Cool. And I mean, we literally do the same thing for episodes. So instead of endpoint character, I'm going to just change everywhere it says character. I'm going to change that to episode. And like we're done. It's pretty nice. I mean, that's it. You know, then I could come here and make a Rick and Morty episode client. Get all episodes, just like that. Run that. Oh. Ooh, what did I do wrong? That's defaulted. Rick and Morty. Oh, okay. So it's like, hey, I don't have this. Why doesn't it have this get all results method? So that's the error. It's just like trying to do get all results, and it's like, I don't have this method. It's because this object isn't a child of anyone, right? We got to give it a parent. So we're like, hey, I need you to have that. And you get it from your parent, right? The Rick and Morty base client has this. You need to have it too. So we're going to do that now. Now it works. Very cool. So we have this. Now let me show you how to shorten this so that way we don't have to do anything here. Okay. Do you see how both of these have this init method where I give it an endpoint? We are going to get rid of it. And we're just going to call this endpoint. And we're going to call this endpoint. And we can still reference it here. But now up here on the base, we're also going to give this an endpoint. But what endpoint do we want to give the base? We want to give it none. And in here, we don't want to pass in an endpoint. We're like, hey, just use this endpoint. Okay. So I'm going to say, so now what's going to happen is, by default, if I do the base client, so let's go back and do the base client. Get all results. What's going to happen? Well, I'm going to get this base client. I'm going to run this method. It's going to do self.endpoint as the endpoint, and it's going to be none. So what does this mean? It can't do it because it can't handle a none type there. Even if I put in an empty string, it still throws an error, I believe. I can't see it, sorry. Yeah, because it's not getting anything back. So what we want to do is in here, we want to say if self.endpoint is none, raise exception. And we're just going to say cannot use get all results from base class, must use child classes. So we're like, hey, you can only use this in a child class. You can't use this in the base class. And you'll see that error here now whenever we use it. So that's one way we could handle this. We can also make it so it doesn't throw an error and you can pass it in, but I don't want it to be passed in. I kind of want it to be self-referenced. I don't know. I go back and forth. Maybe we do want the base client, maybe we don't. You can always refactor it however you want. I'm just gonna say we just want the endpoint attached to the base client. We don't want to pass it into this method. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and just put this back up here because it's easier to read now. So now I don't need this, and I don't need this. I do need that inner. I mean, I don't need it, but it looks better without it, or with it. So now I can just say Rick and Morty character client, and it by default will use this get all results method. And same thing with episode client. So I'm going to do the episode client just because it's a little bit shorter to run. but it's going to come in here. It's going to run this get all results, and it's going to use its self.endpoint here. And its endpoint is episode. So let's run it. Let me clear this out. Very nice. And this is really like the foundation of building clients is building a method. And in this case, we're just doing the get all method and abstracting it to different endpoints. And really the key to doing this is the fact that we have this pages or we have this next parameter. Both of those, I mean, you could use either one logically. I'm used to using the pages. You can use the next. They're all really great to use. And we're not going to do other endpoints. We're kind of just going to keep it a little simple today. But I just wanted to show y'all that because this is a really useful skill. APIs can get a little crazy, and being able to abstract them out like this is going to make your development much easier. And you'll see that in the next video where we go through get rid of that, where we go through actual ETL. This is not going to be an ETL tutorial. I wonder if I can rename this. Yeah, API. I'll put client tutorial. So yeah, I hope this video was helpful. I hope you learned a little bit. Let's go to the README and check everything. We identified the authorization type, which was none. We identified the base URL. We identified the different endpoints, their parameters, and we read the docs for the various calls. We didn't identify the exception errors, but if you're building out a really nice class, what you want to do is you can usually come here. Sometimes it's at the bottom. I guess it may not have it. Sometimes you can see like the different errors that it'll throw whenever using it, and it's just helpful so that way you can raise specific exceptions. Yeah, it doesn't have it. Oh well. But anyways, I hope this was helpful. Like I said, thank you for watching. We'll do an ETL job in the next video. And yeah, that's it for me. Y'all have a